So good afternoon, champs and champresses, or good whatever time you'll be watching this. So this is my very first video that I'm shooting, knowing that I'm shooting for YouTube. So I guess the quality will be better, and I really hope it will be. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. Having said that, let's just dive right in. Today I want to talk about something that is particularly, it's not pretty gospel. It's not something that we want to hear, but it's something that we need to hear. And because it's the truth, it needs to be said, no matter how harsh or hard it is. So today I want to go through John chapter 9. And you see this chapter in itself it's very deep. Like theologically, it is very deep. But I'm not going to delve into all that because the point I am going to make is really surface area. So we're going to keep it on the surface area. So in this chapter, we see Jesus meets this blind man who had been blind from birth, and Jesus heals him. And this healing brings about troubles even with his friends, like the people who had seen him as being blind from the time he was born till now that he was an adult could not believe that it was him. And the Pharisees actually had problems with the fact that Jesus actually healed him, because at the time there were a lot of issues with following Jesus or following the laws of Moses. This was an issue. Even after this healing, there's a lot of things that this guy had to deal with as a result of these issues that surrounded his healing. And as I look at this story, I'm going to go through the nature of his situation and the nature of how he was healed and why he was healed. You see, as we look at the situation this guy was in, we see Jesus had come to where he was at with his disciples, and the first question they asked was Rabbi or Rabbi, depending on how you pronounce it. So, Rabbi, this man has been blind from the time he was born. Is it because of his sins or his parents' sins? That is the question the disciples asked. And you see, it's understandable because at the time, the Jewish culture was that if someone was born with a disability or a deformity, it meant that he was either paying for his sins or the sins of his parents or his parents' parents. Because in Deuteronomy, we see that the law of Moses was categorical that the iniquities and transgressions of people will be visited by God after the third or the fourth generation. So when someone's born with this deformity or disability, it meant that either he was the sinner or his parents' were the sinner. See? And then this question by the disciples as to why this man was born blind also shows the nature of us as human beings. We tend to see situations as being direct consequences of people's actions. Either if they're successful or they're at a good place, it's because of the decisions they made or the hard work they put into it, and therefore they earned it. Or if they're at a bad place, it's a consequence of their decisions. It's because they deserve to be there. So it's either they earned it or they deserved it. So this guy being born blind, they were viewing it from this perspective, this tunnel vision that, yeah, he deserved it. And when Jesus was asked this, his response to it all was quite different. It was quite categorical that this guy did not deserve being here. But he said that God created him like this so that his glory could be seen through him. And that's where I have a little bit of a problem and an issue with Jesus, because like this guy had to be born blind and grow up blind and still be blind in his adulthood, like 20, 30 years, because the Bible is not categorical on how long he had been blind before Jesus actually healed him. So this guy had been blind for all these years. And you want to tell me it's just because God's glory needed to be seen? Yani, it couldn't be seen in another way. There's no other option. The God who created the universe had no other way to show his glory. But when you look at it like this, in as much as I'm kidding right now, there's some pain behind it. For human beings, it's better when you're dealing with the consequences of your actions. Like if you drank too much yesterday night and today you wake up with a hangover, it makes sense. You won't complain. You probably just say, I'll never be drinking again, but you won't complain. But when you wake up with a hangover or the symptoms of a hangover without actually doing anything, you'll be like, why is this happening to me? So many of us are in this situation where we are dealing with pain and hurt that we didn't deserve. Why did those people come into my life and say that they would do things that they eventually didn't, and now I'm here? Now I'm dealing with this pain. Now I'm dealing with rejection. Now I'm depressed. Now I'm dealing with anxiety because of situations that I didn't ask to be in. I didn't ask for that sickness. I didn't ask for that bankruptcy. I didn't ask for me to fail in that exam, and now I'm here. And you're telling me that I didn't deserve this, and it's for God's glory to be seen. No, I'm not gonna take that. And you see, when I read this Bible story and I saw it like this as a result of this preaching by Holy Fatik, it it reminded me of the story of DMX. Like 1.5 months ago, the world lost an icon in the name of DMX. And the people who actually know me and know me well know that I'm a G. Like, hey, I'm a Christian gangster. One of the main genres of music that I listen to is old school rap. And DMX is like the cream de la cream of all this. Like, he's the only rapper, he's the only artist, I think, who has had 5 consecutive albums charting at number 1 at the top 200 Billboard. So he was a Mbaya bana. But you see, he tells the story of how he was introduced to the drug problem that he had for maybe all through his life. He said Rediron, a person who he had seen as his elder brother, who he had trusted. One day he had come from school and Rediron was smoking weed. And Rediron is like, you can try this. And he was 14 at the time. He was like, no, I don't do that. That's not my cup of tea, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, and after a lot of convincing, he was 14. So after he was convinced, he took a puff. And when he took that puff, he blacked out, only to wake up some time later and realize or be told that this thing that he had put in his body in the name of weed was actually laced with crack. And this began a long series of drug issues that he dealt with. He cancelled shows because he was in and out of rehab. It was part of the reason why his marriage broke down. It was part of the reason why he went to jail all those times. And it is this same problem that led to his death. You see, he didn't pick this fight. There's a preaching Pastor Stephen Fatik talks about called When the Battle Chooses You. You see, DMX didn't ask for all this. He didn't ask for his family trouble that led him to actually trusting strangers like that. He didn't ask for his disjointed childhood where he was taken to a home and he was lied to by his mother that he was just being taken here to visit, only for his mother to leave him there and for him to stay there for the next 18 months. He didn't ask for all that. He didn't ask for that tough childhood, but it's the battle that was given to him. And even he himself describes his life as a blessing with a curse. So what happens when we are plunged in situations where we didn't ask for, but we're already there? You see, we can't start acting like the world owes us something. We have to channel through it. And when we go back to the story of Jesus healing the man who had been blind from birth, you see, Jesus picked soil, mixed it with his saliva, and put it over the blind man's eyes and told him, go to Siloam and wash your eyes away. You see, it's one thing about this method of healing that I said I'm going to talk about the nature of how he was healed. You see, Jesus could have just spoken a word, but he chose to spit on soil, put it on someone's eyes, and tell him to walk around like that. You see, one thing is, saliva stinks. I don't know if it's just for me, but saliva stinks. Saliva stinks like hell. So this guy was walking around with saliva near his nose, and he could smell it. And the worst part was, it wasn't even his own saliva. Then he had to walk around with mud on his eyes, from the point where he was to the point where Jesus had sent him. And you see, what happens when we're in situations we didn't ask for? And now we are like, okay, God, I'm already here. Now heal me. And God chooses a method of healing that is the most unattractive way. He could have chosen to heal you. And you're here telling yourself, God, this stinks. Crying all through it stinks. Me being depressed stinks. Me thinking I'm okay, then 2 months later, I'm not okay again. It stinks. Sometimes how we heal stinks, but it's still healing. Sometimes how we don't want to heal, how God has ordained for us to heal, but we have to weather through it. And remember, people had to see this. He was walking around with mud on his eyes, so he had to see it. So even worse, what happens when you are going through things that you didn't ask for? And it's okay when you are healing in ways you don't want to heal, but it's on your own. But what about when people can see it? What about when people start asking you, why are you crying all day? And you're like, I don't know why I'm crying all day. People are like, what's up with the attitude? Why don't you want to go out with us? Why don't you want to hang out with us? And you're like, I don't have my social batteries are low. And you see how God does everything, how Jesus does everything. It's all divine. You see, sometimes we see the healing as divine, but not the method of healing. But you see, God says everything works out for the good. Like, not only will that situation work out for your good, but how you get through it will also work out for your good. Because God is trying to teach you some things and inculcate some things and ingrain some things in your heart and mind that will either prevent you from getting in a similar situation or will help you in later years or later months or later days, but you won't know it until you go through it. And now that I've talked about the nature of the situation he was in and the nature of how he was healed, now the question is, why? Why did God allow all this to happen to him? Why did he allow him to be born blind? Then why did he allow him to be healed in such a way? When this man was healed, yes, it was for him, but it wasn't just for him. God heals you for you, but not just for you. When this man was healed, he was healed to the point where his friends couldn't believe, or the people who had seen him from before could not believe that this was the same guy who had been blind. Yes, God will get you out of that situation to the point where people won't believe that you are the person who are dealing with that thing, or that issue, or that person. God does healing. And you see, at this point, the significance of this healing was that at this point, the Pharisees were so against the teachings and the following of Jesus that anyone who seemed to agree with the teaching of Jesus and started following him would automatically be kicked out of the synagogue. That's how bad it was. And when Jesus healed this person, obviously the Pharisees had an issue with it. They were asking, why was he healed on the Sabbath? Then this man does not come from God, because how does he heal on the Sabbath without acknowledging the laws of God? Why? Why? And you see, it's in the middle of all this that they called the man who had been healed, and they asked him repeatedly about how Jesus had healed him. And what came out in all this was that inasmuch as the Pharisees disagreed with this healing, there was something critical and key that came out of this. You see, even the Jews, inasmuch as they were being indoctrinated not to believe in the teachings of Jesus, they saw that it was apparent that no one could have such power to heal someone who had been blind from birth unless they were either God or from God. And I just want you to see this in your situation, that inasmuch as you might be going through some things, it is healing that will actually be used for the glory of God. This reminds me of a song by Jonathan Taylor, which he says that inasmuch as my will may not be done, inasmuch as what I want may not be done, let it all be for the glory of God. Whatever situation I'm going through, whatever pain, whatever hurt I'm going through, let it all be for the glory of God. And you see, the funny thing is, this man who was healed by Jesus, he did not even know who Jesus was. At first they asked him, who healed you? And he said, the one they called Jesus. He didn't even know who Jesus was. And later on, he was asked, what is your opinion of him? And he said, I think it was a prophet. So twice, he was asked about who Jesus was and his nature, and he didn't know it. Because sometimes when Jesus heals people, you see, Jesus did not just come and live and die for Christians. He came for the whole world. So it doesn't matter whether you know him or you don't. It doesn't matter whether you know him or they know him. God can still work in your life so that you can finally get to know him as a result of this. Because when Jesus healed him like this, later on, after the whole fiasco of the Pharisees, Jesus finds him again. You see, sometimes you can be healed, yes, and be brought out of that situation, but by virtue of you actually being brought out of that situation, now puts you in a position where you need Jesus again. You don't know how to deal with the people who you are actually in misery together when you are praying for healing. But now that you are healed, and you no longer walk the same way, you no longer move the same way, they're calling you fake, and you don't know how to move, and Jesus finds you again, the same way Jesus found him again, after he was getting trouble for the very healing he had been waiting for his whole life. And Jesus asked him, you know about the Son of Man? And he said no. But when Jesus identified himself, the man believed in him and worshipped him. So today, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know the pain. I don't know the hurt. I don't know whatever predicament you are in, either because maybe you brought it yourself or because it's just life being life. I just want you to know that it's all for his glory. It's all for his glory. And the question becomes, why can't he use another way? Why couldn't I be healed in another way? But it's just life. In John 16:33, Jesus tells us that in this world we'll have trials, we'll have troubles, we'll have tribulations. Because you see, we're in a fallen world. So bad things happen to good people sometimes. Sometimes I look at my life and I'm like, it was easier when I wasn't this kind of Christian. It was easier when I was still living for the world. It was easier then. But it's worth it now. It wasn't worth it then. It's worth it now. So in this world, you'll have troubles. And another thing we can take is, you see, the same Jesus who healed this person, who might not have deserved what he got, where he was in, but he was still there. The same Jesus who healed him also went through things he didn't deserve, for people who didn't deserve it. And if that blind man did not deserve the pain, do you really think Jesus deserved or asked to be crucified like that, to be beaten like that? He didn't. But he knew it was all for his glory. So it's either Jesus is our example or he's not. But the truth is, if he is our example, we need to understand that sometimes some things will happen to us that we don't deserve. And we'll have to hold on to him until he takes us through it all. And finally, we'll be able to know that all this, everything that happened and how it happened and how we healed from it and how we are here now, it's all for his glory.